other guy going, the one guy is cool.
In 1948, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein didn't just revive three legendary monsters, it saved an entire studio, made film history, and quietly ended the golden age of Universal horror. Tonight on Iconic TV Rewind, we're uncovering the weird, bizarre, and behind-the-scenes truths hiding inside this unlikely classic.
I'm back.
Fact number 1. Lou Costello called it garbage. Before cameras ever rolled, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein almost collapsed under the weight of its own script. Lou Costello despised it. He openly mocked the story, reportedly saying that his 5-year-old daughter could write something better. To Costello, the idea of mixing slapstick comedy with Universal's sacred horror icons felt cheap, desperate, and creatively bankrupt. He initially refused to participate altogether. Universal didn't argue. They bribed him. The studio offered Costello a staggering $50,000 salary advance, a serious sum in 1948, and sweetened the deal by bringing in Charles Barton, a director Costello trusted to keep the comedy sharp and controlled. Reluctantly, Costello agreed. What he didn't realize was that this garbage script would become the most beloved monster crossover in film history. Fact number 2, Lugosi's one and only Dracula returned. Bela Lugosi's name is forever tied to Dracula, yet Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein marks one of the strangest footnotes in horror history. Despite playing vampires in dozens of films, Lugosi officially portrayed Count Dracula only twice in his entire career, once in 1931 and once more here 17 years later. In the years between, Lugosi had watched his career erode as Universal sidelined him, recast the role, and slowly dismantled his legacy. By 1948, this return wasn't a triumphant revival. It was a final curtain call. Lugosi played Dracula straight, without parody, menace intact, voice sharp, and commanding. Surrounded by slapstick chaos, he refused to wink at the audience. This was Lugosi reclaiming his crown one last time, even as the horror world he helped create was fading into history. Fact number 3. The monster couldn't stop laughing. Glenn Strange had played Frankenstein's monster before, but never like this. Under layers of heavy makeup, towering boots, and the expectation of silent menace, Strange found himself struggling to stay in character, not because of fear, but because of Lou Costello. During the famous scene where Castello unknowingly sits on the monster's lap, Strange repeatedly broke character, shaking with laughter as Costello unleashed rapid-fire improvisations that weren't in the script. Take after take was ruined as the supposedly terrifying monster dissolved into silent giggles beneath the makeup. Crew members had to pause filming just to let Strange regain control. It's one of the most ironic moments in Universal horror history. The monster who once terrified audiences worldwide couldn't survive a slapstick routine without laughing. Fact number 4. One actor played two monsters. Lon Chaney Jr. was already pulling double duty in the film as Larry Talbot, the tragic Wolfman. But halfway through production, fate intervened. Glenn Strange fractured his ankle during filming, leaving Universal scrambling to finish key monster scenes without delaying the schedule. The solution was simple and bizarre. Chaney stepped into the Frankenstein monster makeup and filmed the scene where the monster hurls Sandra through a window. For that brief moment, Chaney became both the Wolfman and Frankenstein's monster in the same film. No audience was meant to notice. It's a rare instance in film history where one actor physically embodied two of Universal's most iconic creatures, a symbolic passing of the torch in a franchise already nearing its end. Fact number 5. Frankenstein ate lunch with a mermaid. Universal Studios in the late 1940s was a surreal place, but few images captured that better than lunchtime during this production. Glenn Strange, still in full Frankenstein makeup, would wander across the lot to eat lunch, often alongside Anne Blyth, who was filming Mr. Peabody and the mermaid on a neighboring soundstage. Tourists visiting the studio were stunned to see the monster casually eating sandwiches beside a woman dressed as a mermaid. No fanfare, no separation, just two cinematic creatures sharing a midday break under the California sun. It was an unintentional snapshot of Universal's golden age fading away, the monsters no longer lurking in shadows, but walking openly among the living, waiting for their final curtain call. Fact number 6, the studio hired professional laughers. Despite the reputation of Abbott and Costello as comedy machines, the set wasn't always roaring with laughter. Long shooting days, heavy monster makeup, and complicated blocking often drained the energy from the room. Universal had a solution that sounds absurd today. They hired extra comedians whose sole job was to laugh. These professional laughers were brought in between takes to keep morale high and remind the cast when a gag was supposed to land. Their laughter helped reset the rhythm of scenes and gave Abbott and Costello immediate feedback on what worked. In an era before laugh tracks dominated television, this was a strange hybrid. Manufactured laughter shaping genuine performances. The result was a film that never feels tired, even when the production clearly was. Fact number 7. Daily pie fights were mandatory. Abbott and Costello famously ignored scripts, and Meet Frankenstein was no exception. The duo constantly improvised, rewriting scenes on the fly with physical gags and verbal riffs. According to crew accounts, at least one pie fight or a food-based gag happened every single day of filming, planned or not. Yet, there was one rule they never broke. No pies were ever thrown at the monster actors. Glenn Strange, Lon Chaney Jr., and Bela Lugosi were treated with near reverence, partly out of respect, and partly because removing pie from elaborate makeup could take hours. The comedy could run wild, but the monsters were sacred ground. Fact number 8. Lugosi refused to play along. While most of the cast embraced the chaos, Bela Lugosi wanted no part of it. He despised the horseplay, refused to improvise, and reportedly glared at anyone involved in on-set antics with his famous icy stare. To Lugosi, Dracula was not a joke, and neither was his performance. This tension actually worked in the film's favor. Lugosi's deadly seriousness contrasts sharply with Abbott and Costello's panic, grounding the supernatural threat even as comedy explodes around it. Unintentionally, Lugosi became the film's anchor, treating the material like a legitimate horror sequel while everyone else sprinted headfirst into madness. Fact number 9. Boris Karloff had a bizarre publicity stunt. Boris Karloff did not appear in the film, but Universal still found a way to use his name. In a bizarre publicity stunt, the studio paid Karloff's hotel bill in exchange for him posing outside theaters, pretending to buy tickets to see the movie. There was just one condition. Karloff made it clear he would not actually watch it. Having moved on from the monster years earlier, he refused to participate creatively, but understood the power of his image. For audiences, seeing Karloff associated with the film gave it instant credibility, even as he quietly kept his distance from the screen. Fact number 10. Costello got punched for real. One of the film's most dangerous moments wasn't planned at all. During the final chase, Glenn Strange's monster smashes through a door and throws a punch. Lou Costello deliberately stepped off his mark, mistiming the stunt, and took the hit directly to the jaw. The impact was real. Costello was briefly stunned, but stayed in character and finished the scene. Universal kept the take. In a film built on controlled chaos, this was a reminder of how thin the line was between slapstick comedy and genuine injury, especially when giant monsters were involved. Fact number 11. Vincent Price has a secret cameo. The final surprise of Abbott and Costello. Meet Frankenstein doesn't appear on screen, it's heard. In the closing moments, the Invisible Man suddenly speaks, teasing yet another monster crossover that would never fully materialize. That smooth, unmistakable voice belonged to Vincent Price. At the time, Price wasn't yet the horror icon he would become in the 1950s and 60s. Universal treated the moment as a playful bonus rather than a marquee event, and Price received no on-screen credit. Audiences heard the voice, laughed at the reveal, and moved on, never realizing they just heard the future face of gothic horror cinema. In retrospect, it feels like a passing of the torch between Universal's fading monsters and the next generation of horror royalty. Fact number 12. 2 monsters got cut. Early drafts of the script were even more ambitious and even more chaotic. Universal originally planned to include Carice the Mummy and Count Alucard, Dracula's son from Son of Dracula. The film was shaping up to be a full-blown monster traffic jam. Budget concerns, runtime limitations, and narrative overload forced the studio to scale back. The Mummy was dropped entirely, and Alucard vanished before filming began. What remained was a carefully curated trio: Dracula, the Wolfman, and Frankenstein's monster. Ironically, cutting two monsters helped make the film stronger, tighter, and far more accessible, proving that sometimes less really is more, even in monster mayhem. Fact number 13. International censors tore the film apart. Outside the United States, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein was treated less like a comedy and more like a public menace. In Australia, censors removed nearly every scene involving the monsters, leaving behind a hollow shell of jokes without any supernatural presence. The horror was gone, but so was the balance that made the film work. Canada went even further. British Columbia initially banned the film outright. When it was finally approved, most of Lon Chaney Jr.'s Wolfman scenes were cut, severely damaging the story. In the United Kingdom, distributors went a step further by renaming the film entirely, releasing it as Abbott and Costello Meet the Ghosts to avoid invoking Frankenstein's name. What Universal intended as a playful collision of comedy and horror became, overseas, a fragmented and censored curiosity, proof that even laughing monsters were still considered dangerous. Fact number 14. The monsters were forbidden from acting silly. Despite the film's slapstick reputation, Universal enforced one strict rule: the monsters had to be played completely straight. Glenn Strange, Bela Lugosi, and Lon Chaney Jr. were explicitly instructed never to wink, mug, or acknowledge the comedy happening around them. The laughs were meant to come solely from Abbott and Costello's terror, not from the monsters themselves. This decision was deliberate. Universal feared that turning Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, or the Wolfman into jokes would permanently destroy their legacy. Ironically, this restraint is exactly why the film works. The monsters remain credible threats, while the comedians unravel in their presence. Comedy erupts not because the monsters are funny, but because they aren't. Fact number 15. The monster mysteriously talks again. For fans of Universal horror continuity, this detail has puzzled viewers for decades. In Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, the monster speaks, despite the film offering no explanation for how he regained his voice. The last time the monster spoke was in The Ghost of Frankenstein, and subsequent films left him largely mute. Here, continuity simply didn't matter. Comedy took priority over lore. The monster talks because the scene needed it, not because the story earned it. It's a quiet admission that the rules of Universal horror had changed forever, and that this film marked the franchise's final transformation. Fact number 16. It had a huge budget for a B-movie. Although it was marketed like a lightweight comedy, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein was anything but cheap. Universal poured nearly $800,000 into the production, an enormous sum for a film still labeled a B-movie. Previous Abbott and Costello pictures were made fast and lean. This one wasn't. The studio invested heavily in sets, monster makeup, stunt work, and lighting to ensure the creatures looked authentic, not cartoonish. Universal understood the risk. If audiences laughed at the monsters instead of with them, the experiment would fail. That budget bought credibility and ensured the monsters' final bow looked worthy of their legacy. Fact number 17. Universal killed its own monster makeup legend. This film quietly marked the end of an era. For the first time, Universal relied heavily on rubber facial appliances designed by Bud Westmore and Jack Keevan instead of Jack Pierce's legendary, time-consuming cotton and collodion techniques. Pierce's methods had defined Universal horror for over a decade, but they required hours of daily application and removal. The new rubber pieces were cheaper, faster, and reusable, a studio executive's dream. For performers, they were a mixed blessing. Less chair time, but less expressiveness. The shift symbolized Universal's changing priorities, efficiency over artistry, and foreshadowed the modern age of creature effects. Fact number 18. The opening credits were made by a ghost. The film's playful, spooky animated opening stands apart from anything Universal had done before. For decades, it's been widely attributed to Walter Lantz, co-creator of Woody Woodpecker. Some historians dispute the claim, but one detail remains certain. Whoever created it went completely uncredited. The sequence perfectly sets the tone, blending gothic imagery with mischievous humor in a way live action couldn't. It's a miniature cartoon haunting that prepares the audience for a genre collision unlike anything they'd seen. The fact that its creator remains officially anonymous only adds to its eerie charm. Fact number 19. It became a national treasure. More than half a century after its release, the film received its ultimate validation. In 2001, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein was selected by the Library of Congress for preservation in the National Film Registry. The designation recognizes films deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. For a movie once dismissed as disposable comedy, this was a stunning reversal. The film wasn't just saved, it was canonized. What began as a desperate gamble became a protected piece of American film history. Fact number 20. It saved Universal from bankruptcy. The biggest twist wasn't on screen. Released in 1948, the film earned over $2 million, making it one of Universal International's highest-grossing films of the year and the most successful Frankenstein picture since 1931. At a time when the studio was struggling financially, this unexpected hit kept Universal afloat. It didn't just revive the monsters, it gave them a proper send-off. After this film, Universal horror would never return in the same form. The monsters didn't die in flames or fade into obscurity. They laughed, scared, and exited together.
He won't hurt you. Come.
Lou Costello called it garbage. Critics expected a gimmick. Instead, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein became the final triumph of Universal's Golden Age monsters. A strange, joyful collision of horror and comedy that preserved these creatures for generations to come. It was the end of an era, the birth of a classic, and proof that sometimes the most unlikely ideas leave the longest shadows. If you enjoyed this deep dive into classic horror history, be sure to like, subscribe, and join us here on Iconic TV Rewind for more strange stories hiding behind cinema's greatest legends.